call the meeting to order at 10:11 and open it up for any public comment.
Pass.
Okay, perfect. We'll move on to our action items. Consideration of an unconditional commitment to cease and desist and not repeat prior conduct pursuant to government code section 54960.2, and I'm gonna let Matt take it from here.
Yeah, thanks everybody. So the item is a connection with a cease and desist letter that was received. I think it's in your packet. It's in the packet that I got. And it involves a request to cease and desist from essentially discussing items that are not properly agendized. It arose from an item that was on the agenda last month regarding approval of the bylaws, and that item, there was a decision to postpone that item for further consideration, which is fine. And then there was a discussion after that decision had been made as to the reason why. When we got it, the further it progressed into the details is where it becomes problematic. So when you have something like a continuance of an item, you should give a very general description as to why the item needs to be continued. And that would have been, new information's come to light and we'd like to analyze that with legal counsel. That would have been a sufficient explanation, and we're reviewing that. But then it went into further explanation, further discussion regarding some of the facts underlying why we want to look at these further issues. That's where you get into trouble. So when you receive a cease and desist letter, there's three options. The first is you do nothing at all, and then that gives the person who has provided the cease and desist letter an opportunity to bring an action against the agency for violation of the Brown Act. They could file that. The second option is to dispute it and say, we don't believe we're in violation. And again, that's an opportunity for the individual to file an action to have a court determine whether it was appropriate or not. The third one is what's called an unconditional commitment not to engage in further behavior. And the unconditional commitment is essentially a mechanism where if the agency makes this unconditional commitment not to engage in that behavior, it's kind of weird because it's a cease and desist, but you're not really, you're ceasing and desisting from that inappropriate behavior. If you make that unconditional commitment, then there's not a right for the individual to bring an action against the agency. Now, you are required not to engage in that behavior. I mean, that's essentially what you're saying, is we're not going to be doing that in the future. If you do, that gives rise to a whole nother action. When you're making that unconditional commitment, you're not admitting that there was anything that you did that was improper for purposes. You're not admitting we did something wrong. We're just saying for the purposes of not having to go through litigation on this, we're making a commitment not to engage in this behavior in the future. That is provided to the individual who submits the cease and desist letter, and then there is not an opportunity for them to bring an action. If they bring an action after you've done this, there is a process in the courts that will have to deal with that. And item ought to be dismissed. It could be award of attorney's fees, all these other things. So my recommendation is that you engage in that. I reviewed the videotape. There's an argument. It's a what lawyers like to say, a colorable argument that perhaps the discussion went too far afield. So my recommendation is to unconditionally commit not to engage in that behavior. And in connection with that, this is not the motion what you're considering, that's the motion, is I've talked to Audrey and I've talked to Greg, and I've offered to do pro bono Brown Act training so that all of you understand how the Brown Act works, so that you can kind of police yourselves. Because the other option is to have legal counsel here, and that's really not necessary, frankly, for me to be showing up at all these meetings, right? But for you all to police yourselves. So if you all understand what the Brown Act requires you to do, then you'll have a better opportunity to police yourselves and say, we shouldn't be talking about this, or we should be doing. here's the action item, let's just move forward on the action item, let's not get too far afield. It's always difficult when you're in a group and you all know each other and you all work together collaboratively on a lot of items. Discussions kind of take turns. But a Brown Act compliant meeting is to do the business of the agency. And that's what you should be doing during the meeting. They should be frankly fairly brief, and you should discuss the items on the agenda and then leave after that. So I'm happy to do some Brown Act training so that we don't run into this situation again.
Thank you, Matt.
Yeah.
So are we have a motion to move forward?
Can I ask a
Yes.
question? So Sandoval brought this action,
Yes.
correct? Did he have legal counsel?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Just kind of wondering, this just came out of nowhere from Sandoval.
Yeah, I don't know. I
Okay.
don't know if this is,
Just curious.
if it was written by legal counsel or if it was written by Mr. Sandoval himself.
Okay.
I don't know. You know, I will comment, you know, the Brown Act is a challenge to follow. It's like CEQA, if any of you had to deal with CEQA, right? You know, court can go through and take a look at a development process and probably find something wrong. That's why CEQA actions are so prevalent. It's not hard to make a mistake. It is not hard to make a mistake during a Brown Act meeting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of requirements, pretty detailed. And so this is where the training comes in, is to make sure that you are either have legal counsel there telling you, nope, don't say that, please, move on to the next item, or train yourselves enough so that you understand what you can and cannot do in a Brown Act compliant meeting. So that's.
You said you looked at some tapes,
I looked at a videotape,
a
yeah.
videotape.
Of us in the meeting.
And where did the tape come from?
I saw it on YouTube.
It's Westlife.
From West.
Oh,
Yeah,
I saw
West
it.
posted.
That's what I was
Yeah,
getting
I
at.
saw it on YouTube,
Okay.
and I watched it, and you know, I understand the argument.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter whether I agree with it or not.
Yeah,
I understand
yeah.
the argument.
okay, I understand.
But why is it that SCCIA is subject to the Brown Act? I mean, what qualifies our board for the Brown Act?
So, in your master services agreement, I may not have that correct.
Yeah,
I think
it
it's
is.
a master services agreement with the city of Salinas.
Number.
You're required to comply with the Brown Act. That's
So
why.
we just agreed to do that.
But
It's
we
work.
agreed as to the city to do
Because it's with
that.
the city, and
Well,
they
the
put money
city
in.
asked us, they said, I can read the exact language. if
Yeah,
that's
there's a
helpful.
provision in there that says
That they asked us to do
the
that?
association shall comply with the Brown Act.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was decided back when it was.
So although we are
Yes, sir.
not a public, can you
Well,
go into?
Yeah, are we a public entity? That was my
You're a
question.
nonprofit association, and nonprofit associations may be required to comply with the Brown Act. And there's a code section that comes to play. I think an argument could be made without that provision in your agreement that you may not be subject to the Brown Act. But I haven't gone through that analysis or not. But your obligation to comply with the Brown Act is because of that agreement.
Got it.
Only, okay.
Yeah.
I think we're good to do-
So is that saying Brown Act is that in every city?
Every city complies with the Brown Act, every special district, every school district, every fire district.
In
everybody-
California.
In California.
But that's because they're public, right? I mean,
They're public entities, and there's a specific definition under the Brown Act as to who has to comply with it. Legislative bodies need to comply with it. And it's very broadly defined. So, you know, I always like to say that if you go to, you know, a small city in California and you go to their city council meetings, you're gonna see Brown Act violations left and right. Because they do their very best, but it's hard to always do exactly right. Especially for very small cities that don't have legal counsel there telling them, oh, do this, don't do that. That's the nature of it, and it's hard to, you have to learn how to police yourselves. And there's a way that you conduct Brown Act compliant meetings. And like I said, one of the easy ways to do it is you have an attorney there, and you know, helping guide the meeting. But really the more effective way, in my opinion, is for all of you to understand what you can and cannot
Yeah.
do, because you can police yourselves. And you understand, this is what we should be doing, and discussion is, you know, here, even this discussion, why, are you compliant to the Brown Act or not? I think it's relevant to the item because the violation is, the alleged violation is a violation of the Brown Act. So I think it's relevant for me to discuss whether you're subject to the Brown Act or not. But if you decided to ask another question about another area of public law, I'd be like, that's not what the agenda item is. We're here to consider a unconditional commitment to cease and desist. So we should keep that discussion to that. If you'd like to have a further discussion, that could be agendized at a later date.
Fun. How should we word the motion to move forward on this?
So the wording of the motion should be as it is in the agenda, on the agenda item.
Okay.
And then direction to legal counsel to communicate that to Mr. Sandoval, who sent the letter.
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to consider consideration of the unconditional commitment to cease and desist and to not repeat prior conduct pursuant to Government Code Section 54960.2C. And to ask Matt to relay that to Mr. Sandoval.
Isn't the motion to make an unconditional commitment? It's not to consider an unconditional
Yeah,
commitment,
the
right?
consideration, it's a consideration to make an unconditional.
So.
Yeah, thank you.
the
So we're
motion's
gonna make a motion to
make an unconditional commitment to cease.
to make an unconditional commitment to cease and desist and not to repeat prior conduct pursuant to Government Code Section 54960.2C. And should we also be talking about the training as well?
No, that's not
Okay.
related.
Got it. Okay, so motion.
I'll
Force.
second.
Thank you.
Public
All those-
comment? Public comment?
Any public comment?
I'll pass.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
And that motion included direction, right? To, yeah,
Yes.
respond. Okay.
meeting adjourned.